welcome, welcome, everybody, and welcome to the fabulous Katrina Webb. For those of you who don't know, I work with Be Well Co. My name is Amy Smith, and what we're trying to do is have some important conversations. This is going to be an interactive session in that we're going to ask questions and give you some A or B answers. And if you feel inclined, we would love to, I guess, see the or sense the room a bit. For those of you who don't know Katrina, she is a fabulous human who has been recognised and acknowledged for her success as a Paralympic athlete. She's won gold, silver, and bronze, and she has been in 3 Paralympic Games. She also has done some incredible work as an ambassador for the committee, for the Paralympic Committee. She speaks often on resilience and on well-being, and we were just having a chat before. And I thought, my God, we could just go for hours and hours and hours. But she has also walked the Kokoda track, something that I have always had on my list, but probably will never do, and then beat myself up about. She's trekked base camp Everest twice, and she's a mother to not just one, but 3 beautiful boys. In other words, my God, you are incredible. So welcome, Katrina.
Thank you so much, Amy. It's so great to be here, and thank you everyone for joining. And yeah, I don't mind a challenge, Amy. As you can
Really?
see, yeah. I love challenges. I love to do new things, and it's always been something that I've enjoyed doing. Is it easy? No, but do I get a lot out of it? Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking now we've had this month where in October we were all, all things mental health and well-being. And one of the things that, I was kind of thinking about was we've done a lot of paying attention, and I wondered whether or not, that attention and that care for our colleagues and for people has really been something that we've shown ourselves. And I've always been a bit skeptical because, I was raised with a very tough mother who, said, really, you should never, ever, ever be lazy, and you should never do this and you should never do that. And if you start to feel satisfied, the sky's going to fall in, so you better work harder. And so there are things that I think we've all had that are different experiences, but learning to be nice to myself, particularly in tough times, um, or even just be balanced. I would love to hear from you about why is this so hard?
Yeah, such a great question, Amy. And thanks for talking about your upbringing, because I think it's really important to reflect on. We all have different upbringings and experiences. And I know when I've spoken to my family, particularly my mum's family, they were farmers and worked through tough times. And I know my mum and her brothers were only ever validated when they were doing something. So
Yeah.
they constantly had to be doing all of the time. And so that's something that I've noticed through my lineage, particularly through my mum and my grandmother, and having that awareness myself, realizing that we don't always have to be doing, and that classic quote that you only get to rest when everything is done. But is everything ever done?
Ever.
Ever. So I've had to really unlearn that, and I still am unlearning that as a high performer, as someone who loves to extend myself and stretch myself, but also realizing that validation was something that came through my lineage, that I'm working really hard on not having to be validated externally, but being comfortable in my own skin, which is something that I'm still learning. But coupled with that, even on my journey, I have, as you said, I'm a Paralympian. The reason why is because I have cerebral palsy, and it's quite a mild form. So if you could see me fully in person, you actually wouldn't see that I have a disability. If I tell you what to look for, you can see it. For example, I can only just move my right toes. I can't curl them. But generally, people wouldn't see that when I'm walking day to day. So growing up, I knew I had a disability, but because disability wasn't celebrated, even difference wasn't, particularly when I was growing up. I'm age 47 now. I did everything to hide it, to make sure that I could fit in. And it also meant that not only did I want to hide my disability, I wanted to prove to people that I wasn't broken, because that was my biggest fear, that having a disability, that people would think I was broken. So
Yeah.
I then worked incredibly hard, not just ordinarily hard. I worked extraordinarily hard. I did so much more academically and physically because I wanted to prove to people that I was capable, which paid off because, as you mentioned in my introduction, I've been to 3 Paralympic Games and I thought I would, bring a bit of gold to
Oh, bling, bling,
bring
bling,
a bit of bling.
ka-ching. Look, I love hearing this because what we and we see that and it's like, wow, it's so inspiring. But I can imagine that there were many times along the way where things didn't go as planned. And I've got a child with an intellectual disability, and we don't call it disability. We've decided since she was diagnosed to call it giftability. And so we explore her gifts, and she is the most wonderful. She's like little Miss Sunshine, but it has been a long, hard road. Would you feel comfortable sharing some of the moments that have been really hard and when you failed at something? And I would love to hear from the audience. There's two ways. Well, there's probably more. One is to kind of take a balanced view, I guess, and give yourself a break and encourage yourself as you would a friend. And the other, answer B, is to be really tough on yourself and intolerant of yourself and frustrated with yourself. I would love to know when in some of the failure circumstances, how have you handled it?
Yeah, thank you, Amy. And even I don't even have to mention too much, even on failures from my beginning. For me, trying to prove to people that I was extraordinary at school, I was trying to get 10 out of 10s. I was trying to
Right.
get straight A's. I was trying to be incredible. So even when I got an A minus, I was incredibly hard on myself because I was so worried that people would see that that's where my break point was. That's where I was broken. And so, growing up, that's how I did become very good at things because I worked very hard and I had a very good critical voice, which has helped me in many facets of my life. And of course, that's helped me to be a high performer, win gold and grow. However, it hasn't been the kindest and the most supporting journey. And, since working with Be Well and learning more about the journey of having great mental health, self-compassion and that tool of self-compassion has been a game changer for me. It's taken time because when you have a pattern in place where you become, really critical, you become really tough. I could even, Amy, I could even be emceeing an event, and if I pronounce someone's name wrong, I could beat myself up for days about an error that small.
Yeah.
And I would just keep, it would be like this broken record going, there it is, Katrina, you're broken. Everyone's going to see that you're broken. So it wasn't even big things. It was
Right.
often
It
the
could just be,
small, yeah.
yeah. And that's the thing. And we do obsessive. I call it kind of like my monkey brain. That's when I do something or I say something, I go, damn, why did I do that? And then, I can't sleep. And then it's just going round and round in my head. And I think I'm not sure if everyone on this call has experienced this, but sometimes it isn't even my voice, it's someone else's voice. And sometimes it helps for me to identify who that is, because then I can sort of say, well, it actually isn't about me. But I would love to know from you about how do you circuit break it? At what point do you go, okay, it's time to maybe park or put that inner critic aside and start to do X, Y, Z instead? How do you, in those critical moments, circuit break that
Mhm.
self-criticism and bring in compassion? And what is it?
Yes. So I do it now and I find it so helpful and can do it really well. And thinking about sport and thinking about learning to win gold and to being in the highest level in my sport, I had a psychologist in my team since I was 14. And
Right.
I love to talk about that because, people listening will go, yeah, of course in sport you have a psychologist. We have a psychologist in our team to help us to bring our best mental performance. And then
Yeah.
when I reflect on that in my personal journey without being an athlete, no one else offered me a psychologist along my journey.
Right.
Why? Because I didn't, hit rock bottom, was it burnt out, worn out, stressed out, grieving, or suffering major trauma along that journey where we tend to access,
Yeah.
typically it's getting a lot better. So along my journey as an athlete, and I won gold at my first games in Atlanta, and then for 8 years, I won silver in every single event. A couple
How
of
did
times,
you cope with that?
yeah, a couple of times I said I lost gold, but you never lose gold because you don't, you can't
I
lose
mean,
it.
I feel like a gold
Win
medalist
silver.
might walk around the block. So I'm just saying there's a slight difference between the two.
Yeah. Well, I was getting really hard on myself, right? I had to work with my psychologist to really combat that negative voice around, oh, Katrina, you're getting older, maybe you're not good enough, you've won silver for so long. And so I worked really closely with a psychologist along my journey, particularly at my last games where I won the gold, which I showed you before for the 400 meters.
We do have to see it before the end again.
Yes, we will. And I say to people, there was a lot of things that I did differently to get back to gold, but I will say the main focus was actually working on my own thinking and having fantastic tools in place. And so one of those was actually learning to, firstly have a mindfulness practice. When I came through as an athlete, we really didn't use that term mindfulness. I finished competing in 2006, so it has been some time, but we use that term focus, in the now. And so practicing being in the moment and then noticing what I was thinking was the
Yes.
first step. And so when if I got to the start line and I noticed that I was saying stuff to myself that wasn't helpful, the psychologist helped me to be able to notice it and then let it go and then
Yep.
come back to anchoring in my starting blocks or whatever the anchor point was. And then we also practiced what we call positive enhancing thoughts. So we would have great, anchor points or words that would bring in that positive
And
place.
how did you work out what those words were?
Yeah, it was practice, right?
Right.
What you train, you train physically, but you also train mentally. And we had every step, like I had every step of that race where I won gold in Athens written out on a piece of paper.
Um,
And, there would be times where instead of running around the track, I would just sit and look through the actual steps, the words. And so it became a really strong mental practice. So that first step of being able to notice when your thoughts are not helpful or
yeah.
unwanted or being too toxic or too
Yeah.
critical of yourself, you have got to have that as a practice because if you don't even notice, you become your thoughts and then you
Well, and
react.
that's it. And they're not you because there's a person there that's noticing them, which is deeper. And looking at the results from self-compassion poll one, wow. Okay, 76% of people are super tough on themselves, and only 26% are giving themselves a balanced view of the situation.
Mm.
So clearly, we tend to default towards the negative. I mean, I've got to say, I say things to myself that if anybody said them to me, I'd probably never speak to them again. So
Yeah.
honestly, and that's such a terrible thing to say. And I do use that. I get to a point where I'm in such a pit of, self-loathing that I then have to say, Amy, would you ever say this to anyone you loved? And
Mhm.
that tends to jolt me out of it.
Yeah.
But I think the most fascinating thing you've said is that it's an exercise of some sort. You have to practice it.
Practice.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And Amy, in the past, I didn't need anyone to get in the way of me or anyone to sabotage me because I could do a very good job of it myself.
that's it.
And I've learned not to do that anymore because something that I want to be known for, it's just really clear in my values. And I would love for people to say at my eulogy, it's probably my number one value is compassion.
Yeah.
I love and I have this incredible ability to notice suffering in people. I'm a physio by degree. I followed that path from a very young kid.
Yeah.
And I can notice suffering and I have the desire to want to, help them and take action, particularly in the way that they want to be helped. So if I want to be compassionate, I had a light bulb moment for me along this journey that went, if I can't be purely compassionate to myself,
Yeah.
then I'm a bit of a fraud if I'm trying to give it to other people as well.
Well, no,
So
but I
I've
think that,
tried hard to do it to myself first, and then that ripple effect of being compassionate to others has become even bigger.
well, I think that is very inspiring because you're right. It starts with how you treat yourself, and we all know this, and we read it, and we think, you've got to love yourself before you can love someone else, and that sort of stuff. But I do. I remember sitting with a therapist once, and she said to me, "Perfection is the opposite of self-acceptance."
Mhm.
And I was like, wow, I just need to stop and absorb that because the perfection thing. um, is real. And I kind of want to talk about it in a work context, um, because I think for many people, at this point in time, work has changed so dramatically because of COVID. A lot of the normal cues that we had that validated us, we don't really have. We also have changed the way we feel about working together every day, going to an office every day. I found it quite stressful. If someone said something that wasn't, absolutely on point, I kind of go into paranoia and go, oh my God, they said that, but what did they mean? And why didn't they say that? And you start tripping on this. I'd love to hear from people in the audience whether this is happening to you. But can you sort of give us your view on, work now and how to be self-compassionate at work in that environment?
Yes, gosh, yeah. So, you know, compassion comes when, yeah, things don't go to plan. Particularly, maybe you make a mistake or you have a setback, which is a part of life, isn't it? It's a part of being human. Things don't go to plan. So, as I said, that mindfulness is, such an important skill to practice and learn. And as you start to learn more about other psychological tools that you'll even see in the Be Well program, mindfulness is the underpinning skill for a lot of them. So you've got to actually be able to notice and understand what you think. That process of thinking about your thinking is really key. And the second part that's been really helpful, if we look at the work of Kristen Neff around self-compassion, is
Yeah.
knowing that we all make mistakes and it's a part of being human. And that's been so helpful to me. And one of the things that I've done more recently is because I struggled. Remember, I mentioned before, I really, really struggled making mistakes. And it was just my ultimate fear that people would then think that I was broken. So I've had to really work hard on that. So as I've gone through, I shared with you this morning, Amy, I missed a meeting this morning. I made a mistake. People, I'm sure on this call, miss meetings too. And
Yeah.
instead of beating myself up, I actually owned it this morning and said, I missed it. I missed the calendar invite was in my computer and not in my phone. And I was having a beautiful walk with my dogs after dropping the
And
kids off.
being totally present
And I
in the,
was, yeah. And
which
I
is
told
really
them honestly,
nurturing.
yeah. I
Yeah.
told them honestly, I didn't make up I actually own the fact that I make a mistake because I know when I share with people that I make mistakes, they go, "Oh, Katrina makes mistakes."
Well, and it gives you
Yeah,
permission. It gives
that's
them
right.
permission, doesn't it?
That's
I,
right. So I try and practice making, when I do make them, I share them with people. And then when I share them, people go, "Oh, I've made the same one." And I go, "Oh, really? Oh, great. Okay." And so that bit's been really helpful. And that final piece about, like you said before, about being kind to yourself and, when you are struggling and when you notice that you are struggling, being able to, think about what you would say to a friend or a colleague. But I do it in a different way. When I hear myself saying stuff to myself, I acknowledge it and I kind of say, thanks, mind. I know you're just I know it's trying to protect me because it doesn't want to see me fail. It doesn't want to see me make a mistake. It doesn't want to see me be rejected. I know that's a part of me that is trying to protect me. And I kind of acknowledge it with a bit of love. And I
yeah.
go, thank you, but no, thank you.
Thanks for having my back, but I've
Yeah,
got this.
that's right.
I mean, that's a
Yeah,
really good thing, isn't it? That
yeah.
because, instead of trying to banish these things, which is pointless, we have these emotions, they come up for us. We're all so different. And, it's like I remember someone showing me a sheet of paper and had one tiny little dot in the middle of it. And they said, "What do you see?" And I said, "There's a dot." They said, "No, Amy, all that beautiful space." But then I remembered every time I cleaned the house or cleaned the kitchen and mum came home, she'd always find one thing. She'd go, what didn't you get to that corner? Or so I know where it comes from and I understand it, but to rewire it
Mm.
takes time. And I think for women, I don't know how many men or women or whatever pronoun you want to use on this call, but I do think it is something that for women is particularly hard when you add the mothering piece, how to be the perfect mother. I look at all of the pressure that exists and all of the comparison, which is miserable. And I wonder too when women are doing that and they're working, there's not an area where at times you feel like you're winning. So I'd love to know what you've got three boys.
Yeah.
Are they all just, little rock stars? Of course they are. But are they easier on themselves?
They're big rock stars.
They're big rock stars.
My oldest will be 17 2 days after Christmas, and he's over 6'3" and nearly 100 kilos. So he's a big rock star. And I married an Olympian, Amy, and that's the beautiful thing of sport. We met at the Australian Institute of Sport. He was the
Wow.
Australian goalkeeper. He went and competed in the Sydney Olympics. And I want to make a big shout out to Eddie and the Stingers, the women's water polo team, because Eddie was
Great.
the assistant coach and the goalkeeping coach at the Paris Olympics, and they won silver, which was super
Yes.
exciting. So my husband and I don't expect anything of our kids. They were running marathons at the age of 2. No, I'm only joking.
Oh my God. I
Only
think I need
joking.
to disconnect from this. No, no.
No,
Well, I mean,
no,
I'm happy
we
if my
are.
children, I said to them the other day, I have gone from being a doormat to wall carpet, and I don't know how this has happened.
Oh, that's funny. Actually, no, we because we both succeeded in our sport, and we succeeded. My husband was quite later in his career, and I had a completely fork in the road. Like, I was a netballer at the Australian Institute of Sport, able-bodied netballer. And then in that year of 1995, I found out that I had cerebral palsy, and I thought I was
Right.
doing a good job of hiding it. And then my career changed to the Paralympics. So we love our kids doing sport. It's compulsory in our family for them to do movement, and to participate, to learn a lot about working with others. But also, sport is a place where you do make mistakes. And I
Yeah.
love it because they've got to learn skills of how to keep moving forward, not get caught up in their head, because they're a part of a team. Whether they choose to go on and be athletes, we don't care.
Yeah.
But we know that sport has been an incredible foundation for us. Even when I mentioned that, I've had a psychologist since I was 14.
Yeah.
Because I was an athlete. What a gift that is. So we love
Huge
to pass
gift.
on some of those mind tools to the boys.
So I would love to ask another question to everybody. So when you're going through a hard time, do you look after yourself more or less? In other words, when it is tough, do you just sort of go, oh, this is just a nightmare and it's terrible and I'm terrible and nothing's working? Or do you say, okay, now's the time to start bringing in some really good self-care? And what does that look like? Um, I remember reading I think I put it in the newsletter. We don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. And I love that because listening to you, you've kind of got that ability to see past your thoughts, past perhaps your bias against yourself, um, to see that it's not the world.
Mm.
Sometimes it feels like everything's against you because you're a failure, you're stupid, you're fat, you're this, you're that, whatever you say to yourself, it feels like you've somehow summoned this against yourself. I would love to know how when you've had those moments, you've won all these medals, is it ever enough? Is it ever enough?
No, I did a video actually, and we could share the link with people afterwards, uh,
Love that.
called Enough. And
Okay,
it's a
good.
video of not being enough, but trying to find the absolute sweet spot of just that right amount of enough. Being fun. Am I funny enough? Am I smart enough? Am I tall enough? Am I kind enough? Am I firm enough? And I just went through all these enoughs. And then my promise at the end of that video is that I am enough. And a lot of work has been going into that, and I'm still a work in progress, but I'm getting so much better at it. But I have put practices in place, Amy, because I do know what my natural defaults, that particularly when I get tired and I'm exhausted, that they will kick in.
Mhm.
So an example, I host a large conference every year in Adelaide called New Day, which was this time last week, a week ago, and that was my eighth. And just from experience in the past, I didn't take care of myself, even though it was a fantastic day. The day after, I know my critical voice will be turned up really loudly. When you've got, 350 people sitting in a conference that you've organized, there is a lot. I feel like I'm exposed in a good way to people's feedback. but I also know that I will be highly critical, and it makes it a really difficult situation. So I've learned from some beautiful friends around me that the day after having a conference, called a complete day off,
Yeah.
where you just fully switch out. Yep,
Yeah.
you don't work, you go into nature. I book in a massage, and that whole even this year I did 3 days. And I surrounded myself with really good people that could support me, and did things like yoga, spent time in nature, got good sleep, didn't try and look into, trying to, because I know my own self will try and wait for that. We might get so much great feedback.
Yeah.
I'll be looking
For the
still.
one thing.
Yes.
One tiny thing, the little dot on the massive piece of beautiful white, creamy, beautiful paper. This is the thing, because that we're wired to do it. And I think that's whether it's nature, yoga, whatever it is. Um, and I think giving yourself permission is the point. And actually scheduling it in.
Mhm,
Very, very important to say to yourself,
mhm,
I need a date with myself. I
mhm.
need to go on a date with myself and something, and look forward to it, and give myself permission to do something I really enjoy. And it doesn't really matter what that is, but take that full break. Looking
Yes.
at during tough times, see, we've got the same sort of pattern. 37% look after myself more, 63% look after myself less. And that is, I'm not surprised by that. But I think what we need to do, as you say, is be much more mindful about getting that balance right, and recognizing that you're not going to just take yourself down
Mhm,
to the bottom.
mhm.
There's no point in that. You've got to find a way to fuel and refuel yourself so you're feeling replenished, and that's very hard when you're super tired and you're
Yes.
struggling.
Yeah,
I,
because things come louder when you're tired and exhausted. And I mean, one of my hacks, which might be nice to share, as I love that you just said having a date with yourself. I'll share this one because when I was an athlete, I never got to be an athlete professionally full time. I either studied or worked, and did a lot of trained 35, 40 hours a week. So I was very good at managing time. And if people wanted to meet me for work and it clashed with my training time, I would say to people, oh, I can't meet you because I'm training. And I've not ever felt this again, but when I would tell that to people, they go, of course you are. You're an
yeah,
athlete. Let's
yeah,
find another time. So for the first 12 to 15 years of my life, people protected my training time because they knew I was an athlete. Now, I haven't competed since 2006. However, I still meet with myself, and I can still call it training, whatever that is. And
whatever it is.
whatever it is, and I schedule them in my work day as well as out of work, but I schedule them in with meetings with myself, and they're not negotiable. And you can get really smart with this because, like, an example of that, I know after running a big event, I need to probably meet with myself for the whole day. But I also know if I've got to give feedback to a client or a colleague, and it's going to be tough, that
Yeah.
I would schedule in a meeting with myself after that to do, some activities that you might find, in the Be Well program or the Oranges Toolkit. So that, what a gift from sport. And I know that is difficult for people. We find it easy to meet with other people and create meetings, but somehow when we put ourselves in
In
the
that same
calendar
boat.
with ourselves, that there could be a sense of guilt or, um, and just that structure for me has been really, really helpful. I'm not an athlete anymore, but I still carried that through.
I love that. I love that idea of giving yourself,
Yeah.
respecting yourself enough to give yourself
Yeah.
a moment.
And share it with
Can I get
people, Amy. Yeah. And so if someone wants to meet with you, be brave and honest and let people know that I'm meeting with myself to take care of myself, because
Yeah.
if we pay forward, right? And we're role modeling to people. So if they see us taking these little moments, they will then feel empowered that they can do the same
Too.
thing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And so does everyone. We're getting some wonderful comments in the chat. Scheduling a meeting. No one liked my going out on a date with myself. I mean, I'm not going out and loving myself sick. What I meant was I'm actually just giving myself permission. You know, oh, how wonderful. Well, look, it's 12:30 now, so I'm not sure whether or not we want to have some time for some questions. So if anyone wants to type a question in the chat, But we do have a lot of tips and not so much tricks, but strategies for this in our self-compassion work that we do. And I think, whatever you're doing, can carry over to your personal life as much as your home life. Because even in what you've just talked about, it's about valuing yourself. It's about living aligned to your values. It's about understanding boundaries and how to set them. And, I think a lot of us end up quite miserable because we say yes instead of no all the time. And that kind of can be really tough as well.
Yes.
Can't
That
it? I mean, that ridiculous thing that you think, if I say no,
Mhm.
what will they think? And will they ever ask me again? Or will I not be seen as a team player? Or that sort of is so tough.
Yeah, and that was one of my biggest learnings, Amy. At the Sydney Games, I won two silver and a bronze. So I won gold in Atlanta, one gold in Athens, but in Sydney I won two silver and a bronze. And I actually, gratitude is my number one character strength. So I was very grateful. But if I'm totally honest with you all, I actually felt like I'd failed because I didn't run any personal bests in Sydney. We call them PBs in sport. And so you have
Yeah.
4 years. And so I actually had to sit down with my psychologist and unpack this because, for me, that's what you want. You want to bring your best. Whether it was good enough for gold, it didn't matter, but I actually didn't bring my best. And so she sat down with me and said, look, let's look at what you were doing prior to coming into Sydney. And my biggest learning in that moment was I love to help people. So my other strength is whether it's compassion or whether it's love, it's probably coming from both of those. And I got asked to do a lot of things after I won my first gold that I said yes to everything that come my way and
Yeah.
was a really good time manager of quantity, not quality. And my psychologist said to me, there's no way that you could be performing at a personal best.
Yeah.
If you want to get back to gold, you're actually going to have to find a way to
And
say no.
I'm
And I
saying,
just didn't know how to say it. But when I used my character strengths of love and kindness, and found a way to say no, I
yeah.
then found the time to get back to a personal best level. And I ran a personal best in Athens, which was my goal, and it happened to be gold. And so that was such a learning because I was overplaying, my strength of love and kindness, but my excellence value was suffering.
Yeah, compromised.
And Brene Brown has been incredible in this space. And she talks about the fact that, if you want to be compassionate, the most compassionate people through her research know what they want and they're clear with what they need. When they say yes, they mean it. When they're able to say no,
Yeah.
but when they go to things, they're compassionate because their boundaries keep them out of resentment. And I just love that.
I love that too.
And so when I feel resentment come up in me, I go, ooh, that's interesting. And I want to try
Yeah.
and point my finger at someone. And my dear Buddhist teacher in Nepal says, when you point your finger at someone, there's three pointing back at you.
That's exactly right.
And then
But
I go,
I
oh,
love, I
I'm
think that
angry. Yeah.
clarity is kind,
Oh, yeah.
it's
Yeah.
kind always.
Yeah.
And it's something that's super hard because giving feedback's tough, all of receiving it's tough, and I know we're sort of venturing a bit off topic, but when you are in that situation and you do start to feel those hackles come up, I know that's when I am doing too
Yeah.
much. I've had the call from mum, my house isn't big enough to host everybody for Christmas and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I know that she wants me to say I'll do it again, but I think I'd rather just sit with a big hat with my feet, dangling in the pool. I really, I feel like there's a lot of expectation. So I
Mhm.
guess it comes down to, yeah, about the expectations that we have about ourselves and understanding them. We've got someone here who's asked for tips for workplaces about how to encourage a healthy culture where self-care is better understood as a necessary tool so that the doers don't consume it. It's that's a really good question. How
Yeah.
I would say do get us in there. But
That's right.
but what
Yeah.
what what could
Yeah.
you what would you want what would you say?
Yeah, I do talk about this quite a lot because even sharing with individuals about meeting with yourself and knowing what you do in those meetings for your with yourself that re-energizes you. And that's important to understand what that is for you because we're all different. And so what I would do, I could say, but I could go for a run, but for other people that could completely de-energize them and they're better off doing a walk or sitting and doing some mindful breathing.
Yeah.
And so once you know yourself, that's helpful. However, if I love that question, if the culture doesn't accept it, and particularly if executives don't role model this as well, and this is whenever I speak to executive and leaders, when they say it's great for my staff to do it, but they're never role modeling it, then
Oh,
it's really the silent, actually, it's not really the thing to do. And so it's got to be
yeah.
role modeled at all levels. And, I encourage teams to sit down and spend time having a meeting going, well, what is it that brings your best? What
Yes.
is it that you like to do X, Y, and so? And then we actually support each other when we see someone potentially going for a run, and you know that your colleague doing a run at lunchtime is their way of taking care of themselves, that you can go, well done, congratulations,
Yeah,
instead
good for
good
you.
for you. Because what can
Yeah.
happen? People roll their eyes and
Yeah.
go, oh, haven't they got enough work to do? Because again, being busy and is validated, even if you're, I'll say dead from the neck up, you're sitting there all day and you've done nothing to energize yourself.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
performance needs to be measured in different ways. Yet that colleague who's gone out and had a meeting with themselves will be so much more efficient in the afternoon. So sharing with each other and our teams is really important. And it's often not something that's talked about.
Encouraging it. Yeah. And
Encouraging.
and maybe that idea of walking meetings, I used to do that where we're in Rowville, and I just I'd say, look, I can't just sit here anymore. Let's go for a walking meeting. And we'd walk around the block and or let's do a short meeting. Can we not do hour-long meetings? Can we do stand-up meetings and let's make it 15?
Yeah.
Um, we've got a couple more questions here that are great. Tips. This is from you to everyone. Tips to make self-compassion resonate more with resistant audiences that may be less susceptible to things like kindness or compassion. Does the sports metaphor help you in this, or do you also adjust the words you use in delivery or promotion of your work? Because when you're sort of presenting to somebody who doesn't really believe in it, that must be so tough.
Mhm. Yeah. And working in mental health and well-being as an athlete, a former athlete that's won gold, who's had a psychologist in my team and done hours and hours of, work in my mind and mental performance is actually a really good connector. So when I speak, particularly in Australia, when I speak to corporate audiences, which I do most of the time, the sporting analogies are very, very helpful.
Yeah.
However, I've worked with some sporting teams, particularly male dominated, and taught self-compassion, and they were really challenged with the concept
In
because,
what way?
in what way? Because the myth that that's weak, that it's wishy-washy,
Yeah.
that they're being taught that you've got to toughen up and suck it up
Be
and
tough.
be tough. But do you know what? Self-compassion is so tough because
Yes.
you have to have the courage to know that you're actually being hard on yourself and acknowledge that to yourself. That is tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
So often I change the language around, okay, if we need to use the term toughness, like when I speak to people about being tough, the toughest part is to do introspection and to, take ownership of yourself and learn about yourself. It's not easy. The work that I've done over the last 25 years, and to step into a Paralympic space and tell people that I have a disability, even though, I really wanted to keep hiding because I was so scared
Yeah.
of fitting in or being liked or being seen as broken. That was tough. That
Well,
work, that's
and
hard.
you've mentioned Brené Brown, but it also requires you to be quite vulnerable. And I love that work around vulnerability because, once you are, it also gives others permission to be, and then you can have a deeper connection in
Hmm.
theory. But I feel like the connection that you're talking with is actually a very deep one within, and that can be I'm sure, very confronting and not always comfortable. It's not like we're saying self-compassion is about wrapping yourself up in, faux fur and
At all.
doing what. No, it's
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 hard.
actually, yeah, it's hard. And I think the athlete stuff is really important because if for some reason, if you're talking about those anecdotes, people can understand them. But I
Mm.
guess we're all everyday athletes of some sort. We're all
Absolutely.
just trying to get through it. And, that in itself, I think that bridge to accepting that those skills, those elite skills, are something that we can all practice are really,
Yeah.
really important.
And Amy, if you think about sport going back not that long ago, the things that coaches used to say to athletes that they're not allowed to say anymore,
Yeah.
because I know stories of athletes that are still, doing work on themselves because of the terrible
Huh.
things that coaches said. So, that coaching voice that might go, "You're an idiot, you made a mistake," da, 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 that
Yeah.
we then pass on to ourselves. It's hard work to work on that. Unlearning things is one of the
It's really
best things
hard.
you can
Well,
start.
especially if I remember seeing the Williams sisters practice, years and years and years ago, and their father was still coaching them. And this is in the UK, and I've never heard any father speak to his children like that. You see it around ovals here with kids' sport. It's like, my God, it's a game. I'm not suggesting that they don't have to learn how to have
Mm,
the right skills, but the level of criticism, which is sort of then tied to I will love you or not,
mhm,
depending on how you succeed or not,
mhm,
is very, very corrosive. And I think what you've just described as that kind of energizing yourself, finding a way to balance it within yourself.
mhm.
It feels like it starts with that. We've got one other question here on tips to manage self-thoughts when you're overlooked for promotions or being noticed. What am I doing wrong? First of all, you might not be doing anything wrong.
That's
But
right.
would you like to answer that, Katrina? We've got 3 more minutes.
That's a good question, and we can come at it from different ways. One of the great things that I'm good at doing, because gratitude is my number one character strengths, I'm really good at positive reframing, and that's a great tool that you can learn. So
Yep.
when things don't go to plan, and you might not get that promotion, um, instead of going to the negative, which we know that's where we're going to go so easily. Remember, it's easy to go the negative because we're
Yeah.
we're wired that way. It's harder to cultivate and hunt the good stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so positive reframing I find really helpful when things don't go to plan, and I actually do it most of the time, to be honest. And I just find it helpful going, well, it wasn't my time, or I could learn which part of it could I have learned from that I could do better next time, or finding the positive. It doesn't mean every situation, no. And I like to say that there's stuff that happens that we also can say that that was just crap.
Yeah.
So it's not always having to silver line,
Yeah.
but it is when you do it in the right time, a positive reframe can be really helpful to move on. And then also ask for feedback,
Yeah.
find out why, get the evidence, because remember, even though they're your thoughts, it doesn't mean they're always true. And we, phone a friend, go and gather the evidence to make sure that we are thinking the right
I
way.
have I have one person who I always ring. She's a very, very dear friend of mine, and she will always tell me. And I think whether I can do it for myself or, and I literally have her on speed dial if I hit a wall like that. But I do think that idea of phone a friend is a really good one. Someone who can tell you, um, and who
And
can
Brene
tell you and
Brown,
who can tell you and care.
yeah, yeah, tell you and care. And I love what Brene Brown says, where she says, Amy, the story I'm telling myself right now is this.
Yeah, the
Um,
story I'm telling
Story I'm telling
right
myself. Like, I
now. I've
love
done that with my kids. I sit there and I go, so the story I'm telling myself right now is that you are,
it. Is this true?
oh, you are so wonderful. Thank you so much, Katrina. That was awesome. And we've had such wonderful feedback in the chat. I hope everybody's really enjoyed it. And it feels like there's some other things we ought to be discussing. We'll definitely do this again. I'm just very grateful that you've joined us today. So thank you.
Oh, Amy, thank you so much. And I want to say a big shout out to you guys, to Be Well, and to the Oranges Toolkit. And I often thought about going back to study psychology because this gift that sport had given me, but I didn't want to work one-on-one. And to see organizations putting psychological skills in programs that are teachable and learnable. I facilitate this work, and it has been so wonderful to pay the skills that I learned in sport to other people. So we don't have to be gold medalists to get access to this, that we all have the right
Yeah.
to, but it is a practice and it takes time. So thank you. Thanks to the team.
Well, it's everyone's saying thank you. So I think people have taken some really good stuff out of this, which is the whole point. And Katrina will get you back very, very shortly, I would think.
Great job, Amy.
Bye, everybody.